gnarled futures. These are very big topics, and they provoke lots of questions. How to plan, how to ensure, how to make rural America more resilient, how to speed relief, how to get the power back on faster, how to mobilize and therefore minimize suffering. And yet, these hows somehow escape the made-for-TV political gesturing, but they endure just as the damage endures. That does it for today. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for September 30th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. In 3 days, 3 months worth of rain, the River Valley town of Asheville, North Carolina is submerged after Hurricane Helene. Water as high as parking signs. Hundreds of roads are blocked. The water system is damaged. Cell power is out. The death toll is still rising, but more than 100 deaths are blamed on the storm. Don't call it a war zone, though. We have enough of those. Israel's four-front conflict continues. Commandos crossed over into Lebanon. A major Hamas leader is dead. And power plants in Yemen smolder after bombings this weekend. All attacks on Iranian proxies, and if its leaders didn't get the message, Prime Minister Netanyahu issued an explicit threat. Console and repair at home, chaos and disrepair overseas. This is the world a president must manage. Tomorrow night, the second in command will debate how their team will go about doing that. And we'll also cover that East Coast port strike that looks very likely. We'll get some context on new numbers from Immigration Customs Enforcement on criminal detainees. And finally, we'll explain why the latest craft to the space station arrived with 2 empty seats. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with the cleanup and recovery efforts in the wake of Helene's 500-mile path of destruction. Tropical storm made landfall last week in Florida's Big Bend area as Category 4 hurricane. That's the strongest system to ever hit the region. More than 100 people have died across 6 states. More than 600 people are unaccounted for. According to Power Outage US, at least 2 million Americans from Florida to Ohio are without power or forms of communication. Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina, which has been severely affected by Helene, says the death toll there is expected to rise as crews clear isolated communities that have been trapped by roads, bridges, and widespread flooding. Roads and bridges, of course, that are closed. President Biden said he'll visit North Carolina Wednesday while discussing the federal response to Helene at the White House. He promised his administration would provide long-term assistance for those affected.
The administration is going to be there, and we just talked about this, until we finish the job. It's going to take a hell of a long time and a serious amount of assets. With federal support, the state has reopened 220 roads, which are going to help responders reach people and get the support they need quickly. Right now, thousands of federal personnel are deployed in your communities, supporting search and rescue, debris removal, power restoration, and getting cell networks back online.
For more, CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry is in North Carolina on the ground. Skylar, what do we know about why the death toll is so high and how it happened to run up those numbers?
Yeah. Well, John, if you pay attention to how officials have responded to this, they have said that many of those, at least who are unaccounted for, if it hasn't been a communication issue because of the trouble that we've been experiencing here in and around Asheville, then they say that it is those who didn't want to leave those mandatory evacuation zones. We are still waiting to see exactly where and how all of this happened and who knew what and when as it relates to any sort of alarms that were sounded, if you will, prior to some of those flash flooding. But remember, for days prior to this, forecasters predicted that this region would be a flash flood zone consistently over the course of about a 48-hour span. And so that is what officials were trying to stress to as many people as possible. We've been in several small communities like this one, Swannanoa, just outside of Asheville. Many of those say that they took heed to those warnings, but some who typically say that They've been through a hurricane, they've been through a flood in the past and felt as if they would do okay. Unfortunately, those numbers, though, look as if some made a mistake.
And Skylar, why was Asheville so badly hit? Is there something, what combination of factors created the mayhem that led to those deaths?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's a combination of things, especially if you look at the ingredients that made up the storm, if you will, of Helene. The uniqueness of its strength that far in. Remember, this was a storm that hit the Big Bend down in Florida and really sort of made its way up through the south before going out west. This is a town that is not prepared for a hurricane, traditionally speaking. They also had a series of days where it was already raining, so much so that officials say that they were concerned about the possibility of flooding before Helene even hit. And so when you take that into account, and the fact that we are in the mountains, and the fact that a lot of these people live not only in those low-lying areas surrounding floodwaters, but in the mountains as well, officials say that there could be the possibility for, yes, floods, but also mudslides and landslides. And so that, mixed with the combination of things that we are normally accustomed to with severe weather, fallen trees, knocked down power lines, I think that was the recipe for the disaster, if you will, as Asheville and other communities around this region try to dig themselves out.
Skylar Henry in North Carolina. Thank you so much, Skylar. Israel has notified U.S. officials a ground incursion in southern Lebanon could be imminent. The operation would come after repeated Israeli attacks targeting senior members of Hezbollah, including an airstrike on Friday that killed the group's leader. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab is following the latest from Beirut. Imtiaz?
Well, John, Hezbollah is in complete disarray following Israel's killing of so many of its leaders. But the militant group's number two, a man by the name of Naim Qassem, who spoke for the first time since the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, insists his fighters are ready to confront any kind of Israeli ground invasion. Now, we've been seeing over the last 24 hours so a massing of Israeli forces on the ground, with some suggestion from within Israel that Israel could very likely enter into Lebanese territory any day now. Now, there's some suggestion that they could be going in small groups, others saying it could be much larger than that. Whatever the case, it comes at a time in which Hezbollah has really just crumpled under Israel's massive air campaign inside here of Lebanon, but also because of its intelligence failures, given the fact that Israel seemingly was able to infiltrate it on almost every level. This comes at a time amid growing fears that any kind of all-out war between Hezbollah and Israel could really trigger some sort of regional war. Already, we've seen Israel strike targets in Yemen, and the fear is that Iran could be drawn into a major conflict. And if that happens, that could potentially also mean the U.S. would be too. President Biden continues to insist that he does not want to see an escalation that seems imminent. John.
Imtiaz Tyab in Beirut. Thank you. Later this hour, I'll speak with a former CIA official on Israel's intentions in the Middle East as the United States and other allies call for de-escalation. Now to the 2024 presidential election. The devastation brought by Hurricane Helene is prompting both candidates to change their schedules. Vice President Kamala Harris cut her visit to Nevada short. She returned to Washington Monday for briefings on disaster recovery. She also plans to visit some of the affected areas, quote, as soon as possible without disrupting emergency response operations. Meanwhile, Donald Trump traveled to Valdosta, Georgia, where schools are closed and a curfew is in place as recovery efforts continue. He toured some of the damage and spoke with residents whose homes and businesses were destroyed by the storm. CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett joins me now to talk about the race, as we do every Monday, which is a lovely tradition. Major, I don't know if you've heard, but CBS is hosting the only vice presidential debate tomorrow. Set the table for us, as we say. What are you watching for?
So I think for Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate, the mandate is to enhance and extend the momentum, the energy, the excitement, the fundraising that Kamala Harris has created around her campaign, and not do anything to detract from any of those things. So enhance, extend. For J.D. Vance, he has to reframe and rebound. J.D. Vance did not get off to a very good start. Some of the things that he has said about childless cat ladies, exaggerations or downright lies about the status of Haitians living in his own state of Ohio, Springfield, Ohio, have created a recoil effect in American politics. So he has to subtly, if possible, try to reframe and rebound from those either misstatements or impressions that did not land nearly as well as he thought they might. Secondarily, I think age is a subtext for this vice presidential debate. Donald Trump is 78. Now that President Biden is not seeking re-election, he is the oldest nominee of a major party in American presidential history. J.D. Vance is 40. Do Americans see within J.D. Vance tomorrow night a future president if the worst should happen to President Trump should he be elected? That's an undercurrent to this debate as well.
Major, you mentioned Springfield, Ohio. Consider with me for a second what's struck me as unprecedented, but maybe you can remember an instance. You have Governor Mike DeWine of the state has written an op-ed in the New York Times saying Springfield, Ohio is a great place. The Haitians there are contributing to the community, essentially cleaning up for the disaster created by the top of his own party's ticket. And now in a Jonathan Martin piece in Politico, you see the governor at a Haitian Catholic mass trying to repair. Here you have a governor doing cleanup for the actions of the top of the ticket. What do you make of all that, and what does that tell us about where we are?
And it's part of the convoluted world of Republican politics with former President Trump as the leader of the party. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, doing all the things you just described, John, is also still endorsing former President Trump for re-election, even amid all of these problems generated by the top of the ticket, misstatements or outright lies about what's going on in his own state. Yet DeWine is still with Trump as an endorsee. And in all my time covering former President Trump, as I've talked to those who support him, they will always tell me something along these lines, John. He's not right in the particulars, but he's on to something bigger. This would be the most elastic definition conceivable of that phenomenon, meaning in the particulars, oh, he may be off a little bit, but he's talking about some sort of larger truth. In Springfield, Ohio, J.D. Vance and former President Trump are not remotely close to the particulars. They are inventing things out of whole cloth to, they say, illustrate a larger question and issue of immigration, where, by the way, there are plenty of factual statements to bring up to criticize the Biden administration and Vice President Harris during this time of their leadership on questions of immigration that are valid, precise, and verifiable. Springfield, Ohio is not representative of that, not by a long shot.
Major Garrett in Washington. Major will be a central part of our coverage of the campaign tomorrow night. And thanks for tonight, Major.
Sure.
And a programming note, join us back here at 4 p.m. Eastern Tuesday for a special vice presidential debate edition of America Decides. And then at 8 p.m., I'll be co-hosting CBS News Special Report leading in to the only vice presidential debate. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern right here in New York City. And you can follow along online and on social media for fact-checking from our CBS News confirmed team. A judge in Fulton County, Georgia, struck down the state's 6-week abortion ban on Monday. In his decision, the judge said, quote, liberty in Georgia includes, in its meaning, in its protections, and in its bundle of rights, the power of a woman to control her own body and to reject state interference with her health care choices. Georgia's abortion law went into effect in 2022 after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. The judge's order reverts the state's abortion policy to its policy before the Supreme Court decision, which makes the procedure legal in Georgia up to 22 weeks of pregnancy. Coming up, the man accused of attempting to assassinate Donald Trump earlier this month appears in court. We'll tell you how that went. Plus, tens of thousands of port workers on the East Coast are preparing to strike. Why they're threatening to walk off their job and how much it's going to cost the economy. You're streaming the Daily Report.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of we the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
The man charged with attempting to assassinate former President Donald Trump at his golf club in Florida pleaded not guilty in federal court Monday. Ryan Ruth is facing 5 charges, including attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate. Prosecutors say the 58-year-old traveled near the golf course numerous times to scout the area. On September 15th, Secret Service agents spotted Ruth at the club with a rifle. They fired at him before he was able to fire his own weapon. Ruth was later arrested as he tried to leave the scene. He faces life in prison if convicted. Thousands of dock workers are poised to walk off the job this week as their union and U.S. Maritime Alliance remain at an impasse in negotiations. In a statement Sunday night, the International Longshoremen's Association said a strike would shut down ports along the East and Gulf coasts starting on Tuesday. The work stoppage is expected to involve 14 ports and roughly 25,000 workers. It would also mark the first coast-wide port strike since 1977. The biggest demands from the union include a 77% pay increase over 6 years. Members also want a guarantee that automated technology will not replace human jobs. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve joins us now. Chris, how would this affect the supply chain, and how soon might the average consumer feel the effects of this strike?
Well, John, good to be with you. The supply chain implications really will depend on how long a strike would go. For reference, the 1977 strike lasted 12 days. The experts we've talked to said that businesses have seen this strike coming for some time. Negotiations have essentially been largely stalled since June, so businesses have been bringing in additional inventory the last couple of months, basically in advance of what they expect will be a strike. What you'll see first, if this drags on more than a few days, perishable items like fruits and vegetables, things you can't really stockpile for too long, those will be impacted first. And then things like car parts, construction materials, some of the things that we were talking about back when the Port of Baltimore was closed because of the bridge collapse, those things would start to run dry. But that's when we're talking 3 weeks, 4 weeks down the line. The most immediate place consumers would see something would be things like bananas and fruit, things that have to be brought in that can spoil.
So here's something that struck me as weird. East Coast and Gulf Coast dock workers earn a base pay of $39 an hour after 6 years. On the West Coast, the number's $55 an hour. Why is there such a massive difference between the two coasts?
Well, part of that is the West Coast longshoremen recently got a new contract. So they have seen a pay raise in recent times. So that is part of the negotiations that are ongoing here now, is to try to balance out the pay from coast to coast.
And the Biden administration says it's not going to intervene. What's the thinking behind that, and might they have to get involved after a little while?
Sure. So the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Commerce, they have been involved this week, certainly, in conversations with both the ports and the unions trying to encourage a deal to get done. What President Biden has said he will not do is use his legal authority to obligate the workers back on the job. The president says he doesn't. He believes in organized labor, that he believes in the right to collective bargaining, and that they have the right, if they choose to strike, to strike. Instead, what the administration is saying is that they want to see both sides come to the table and make a deal. And we heard late today from the group representing the ports saying that just today, both sides have exchanged counter offers that, at least on the port side, they feel that they have made some progress. They're asking for the union to consider extending the agreement beyond the midnight deadline to continue negotiations. The Longshoremen's Union has not commented, and that deadline remains midnight.
Chris Van Cleef, thank you for that update. Nearly 90,000 people in Rockdale County, Georgia, were ordered to evacuate or stay home on Monday. It's a day after a chemical plant fire sent a toxic plume of smoke into the air. The incident at the biolab manufacturing plant started a chain reaction that sent chlorine all over the area. The thick fog made its way to other parts of rural Atlanta, as you can see in these pictures. Officials say the worst of the situation is past and the fire has been put out, but the smoke is expected to remain visible for several days, while the air quality surrounding the facility remains harmful. Recently released data from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is revealing the number of convicted migrants currently in the country. They're part of the agency's non-detained docket, the cases of immigrants facing deportation proceedings without being detained by the agency. The agency sent a letter with the figures to Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez on Friday. It revealed that there are 425,000 non-detained migrants who are convicted criminals in the U.S. 222,000 more have pending criminal charges. Former President Trump is blaming the Biden administration for these numbers. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camila Montoya Galvez joins us now to put these in context. Camila, those numbers are eye-popping. What exactly do they represent?
Good evening, John. Just to level set, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is responsible for detaining and deporting immigrants who cross into the country illegally or who overstay a legal visa. But they are also in charge of deporting and arresting legal immigrants who lose their right to be here in this country, including permanent residents, because of a criminal conviction. And the agency has about 41,000 detention beds to detain people who are awaiting those deportation cases. But that is not nearly enough, John, to detain every single migrant who is facing deportation in this country. That number is now in the millions. And so the agency also runs what you refer to as a non-detained docket. And this is a registry of sorts that tracks people who are not in custody, but who are facing deportation proceedings. And these people are either in state or local prisons serving time in jail and will eventually be arrested by ICE after the completion of that sentence, or they are asylum seekers usually who have crossed the border illegally and are waiting for a judge to adjudicate their cases. Now we have learned that the non-detained docket includes nearly 500,000 immigrants who have been convicted of crimes. Some of them are serious crimes, as you listed, but they are still a small percentage of the 7.7 million immigrants in the non-detained docket. And the number of people in the non-detained docket has increased exponentially under the Biden administration from 3.3 million in the last fiscal year of the Trump administration to now 7.7 million because of the influx at the border. That is true. But the number of people who are convicted criminals on that registry has only seen a modest increase. In the beginning of 2021, in June of 2021, I should say, there were about 405,000 immigrants with criminal convictions on that registry. So there has been a modest increase to 425,000. And it is very important to underscore that not every single person with the criminal conviction on that registry has entered under the Biden administration. In fact, official data suggests that most of them have been here for a long time, John, before the Biden administration took office in 2021 and have not been deported for many reasons. Some of them are still, again, in state and local jails serving their criminal sentences and will be picked up by ICE most likely after that process is done. But some of them are also people that the government cannot deport, John, because their countries, be it Venezuela, Cuba, or other countries, do not accept U.S. deportations, or they are immigrants who actually received legal relief, legal protection from deportation in immigration court, despite having criminal records. And yes, under U.S. law, some people, including convicted criminals, can get protection from deportation if they prove to a judge that they will be killed or tortured in their home country. So there are a lot of complex reasons why these people are still in the country. Some of them are not in ICE custody, John, but they are in state or local custody and federal custody, or they cannot be deported for diplomatic or legal reasons.
So, Camilla, we only have about 30 seconds left, so I'll just try and nail down what I think I heard you say, which is that basically the 425,000 number, it sounds gargantuan. Your point, though, is that 405,000 of that existed in 2021, so that this is not some ballooning that has happened under the Biden administration. And secondly, the number is a little bit misleading because 425,000, some of them are being detained in jails somewhere. They're not just roaming the land free. Is that fair to say?
That is right. According to conversations with ICE officials, most of the serious offenders are still in federal or state and local custody, serving their time in prison for their criminal sentences, and are expected to be picked up by ICE upon the completion of that process, because including under the Biden administration, it has always been ICE's priority to prioritize public safety threats. And obviously people convicted of homicide or sexual assault are priorities for deportation and arrest.
Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you so much for the help with those numbers, Camila. Coming up, early and mail-in voting for the 2024 election has already started in about half the states, yet there's still dozens of outstanding legal challenges regarding how the election will be run. We will try to get to the bottom of all that. You're streaming the Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
this case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. The death toll from Hurricane Helene has surpassed 100 people across the southeast. Hundreds are still unaccounted for, and roughly 2 million people have lost power. President Biden will visit the hard-hit areas in North Carolina on Wednesday. Louisiana will become the first U.S. state to categorize 2 widely used abortion pills as controlled dangerous substances. Classification affects mifepristone and misoprostol, which can also be used to manage miscarriages and treat severe bleeding after delivery. Louisiana already has a near total ban on abortion. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is asking a judge to dismiss one of the 5 federal corruption charges against him. Adams' attorney filed a motion against the bribery charge, specifically saying the indictment does not meet the definition. Adams has pleaded not guilty to accepting illegal campaign contributions in exchange for political favors. Israel has told U.S. officials it could soon launch a limited ground offensive in Lebanon. The operation could begin within hours and would come days after an Israeli airstrike killed the leader of the Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah. The Pentagon says it's positioning a few thousand additional forces in the region to defend U.S. interests at a moment's notice. On Monday, Israel struck central Beirut for the first time in almost a year. President Biden has called for de-escalation, but in a video statement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu suggested the fight was far from over and that his focus would shift to Iran.
There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. The people of Iran should know Israel stands with you. May we together know a future of prosperity and peace.
Let's bring in Andrew Boyd. He's the former chief of operations at the CIA's Counterterrorism Mission Center and a CBS News contributor. So, what is your assessment of Israel's ultimate goal when you see the latest moves they've been taking?
Good evening, John. Their ultimate goals are to eliminate Hezbollah as a threat to northern Israel or to Israel writ large. To destroy the threat posed by Hamas since October 7th, and I believe to deter Iran from taking action that retaliatory or otherwise that would be destabilizing to the entire region, obviously, but a grave threat to Israel. And I think their final strategic goal is once they've eliminated these threats to develop productive economic relationships with the rest of the Arab world, which prior to the October 7th attacks from Hamas, they were doing with the Saudis, with the Emiratis, and others.
Do you think, Andrew, that's possible, given what Israel has done? There used to be, during the Bush administration and even before, discussion about the Arab Street, the idea that the Arab anger over Israeli treatment of Palestinians would make it very difficult for other nations to work with Israel. Isn't that anger going to be increased by the recent activity and make those kinds of arrangements more difficult?
I doubt there was a tear shed in any of these Sunni Arab capitals after the death of Hassan Nasrallah and the decapitation of the leadership of Hezbollah. The Saudis and others in the Sunni Arab world want to have some rapprochement with the Iranians. So yes, that's an issue. But as soon as Hamas is eliminated as a military threat, I do think that the Arab street, so to speak, will then be able to move on beyond that. Yes, there's going to be quite a bit of rebuilding. There's a lot of mistrust between the Arab world and the Israelis. But ultimately, the Israelis want to have economic relations with the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the rest of the Arab world. And I think that benefits their street as well.
How do you assess the U.S. position with respect to Israel? It's been pushing ahead despite the calls from President Biden for de-escalation. Is there a disconnect, or are Israel's actions consistent with U.S. national security goals, even though a president might not be able to say that?
I think it's mixed. I mean, the United States has global security responsibilities. The Israelis do not have that. So I understand why the White House is looking for a ceasefire, a negotiated settlement. But I really think all politics being local, I don't think that's really practical in Israel currently. The overwhelming majority of Israeli citizens want external threats to be eliminated. They've the 100,000 Israelis who had to move out of northern Israel because of the threat from Hezbollah want to go back to their homes. Prime Minister Netanyahu, who leads a fairly extreme government, but I believe that any prime minister who is in power on October 7th and beyond would be following basically the same tactical and strategic principles, because the overwhelming majority of Israeli citizens demand it.
What is it? How should we understand the death of Hezbollah's leadership in terms of that group's ability to operate, how much of a blow that is, and how much Israel may have the upper hand now?
I mean, I think it's a massive blow. Hassan Nasrallah for 32 years has been the general secretary of Hezbollah. He's a political leader, a religious leader. I mean, frankly, was an inspiration to the Shia population. There were pivot points that degraded their credibility starting on February 14th, 2005, when Hezbollah colluded with the Syrians to assassinate Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri. I don't think Hezbollah has ever been looked upon the same, and there's been a great deal of distrust. But he was probably the most credible Arab leader in the region. Their command and control has been decimated. Hassan Nasrallah, Ali Karki, Fawad Shukr earlier this summer, they do not have a command and control mechanism that they had previously, which also means they don't have constraints. There are probably mid-level Hezbollah leaders. Hezbollah is a wounded animal. Wounded animals can be dangerous. Those mid-level leaders may be trying to make a name for themselves. They still have ballistic missiles. So it's a very dangerous time with Hezbollah. So I understand why the Israelis are looking for a ground incursion and are continuing their repeated airstrikes around Lebanon.
Andrew Boyd, thank you so much. November 5th is fast approaching, according to one tally from the New York Times. Right now, there are more active legal battles about Election Day than there are days until the actual election. The latest battle is in Georgia. Democrats filed a lawsuit Monday against the state's election board to block a new rule requiring every ballot to be hand-counted. The Republican-controlled board passed the rule earlier this month. Many Democrats and some Republicans, including Georgia's Attorney General and Secretary of State, have raised concerns with that. CBS News election law expert and political contributor David Becker joins me now. He's also the executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research. David, it's good to be with you. We're going to go over some old ground here, but it's important. Let's start first with North Carolina. Its election board held an emergency meeting Monday to discuss any disruption caused by Hurricane Helene. What's your sense of how bad that could be? North Carolina is obviously a battleground state. It's quite close in the polling there. How do you think this could affect it?
Yeah, good evening, John. I spoke to election officials in North Carolina today. It's going to take some time to fully assess the damage, particularly in about 24 counties in the western part of the state. Things are not great there right now. Roads are blocked, flooded, gas, food, water, cell service is still coming in. It's scarce. So they're probably going to have a better sense later this week on whether facilities or equipment might have been damaged. But there is some good news here. We're still about 36 days out. Mail ballots already went out to those who had requested them. They have excellent ballot tracking in North Carolina. So if there's any problem with those, there's still plenty of time where people can vote in person if they need to, or get a replacement mail ballot if they need to. There's still plenty of time for them to get alternate equipment if they need to try to make up for any problems that might exist. They've already got a website up, ncsbe.gov/Helene, where they've got information. They'll be providing information to people. We should also remember about a dozen years ago, Hurricane Sandy hit the Mid-Atlantic region, particularly New York and New Jersey, just a week before the election, knocking out a lot of polling places, flooding polling places, reducing power, et cetera. And election officials there somehow overcame that in 2012. So this is a little more time. There's devastation in that area. Obviously, people are very concerned, but election officials are handling it best they can.
And just for anybody who might think, if you get two ballots in the mail, somehow you can't vote twice. There are plenty of procedures in place that's not going to happen.
That's correct. Every voter only has one active ballot at any given point in time. If they get a new ballot, the previous ballot was inactivated, or they have to cast a provisional ballot to ensure that the other ballot doesn't come in. There are various protections in place to ensure only one ballot is ever counted at any given point in time.
And while we're on the process of trying to kill things that are not consistent with reality, hand counting, this legal battle in Georgia over hand counting. Remind us yet again, and we're going to do this a lot, hand counting versus machine counting, which is more accurate? And you might as well kill the false claim that the voting machines are somehow hooked up to the internet or some foreign, country or something. Can you help us? Remind us of the ground truth here.
Absolutely. So first of all, voting machines are never connected to the internet. There's various protections against that. Election officials will tell you that, Republicans and Democrats, that's absolutely essential. And also we have paper ballots. So if the voting machines were ever malfunctioned or ever interfered with, we have the paper ballots, and there are audits and recounts to confirm that the machines work. 95% of all voters will be voting on paper ballots, including all of the voters in all of the battleground states in 2024. It's the same as 2020. With regard to the Georgia rule, this is a hand count of the actual ballots, not the votes, but it's being done at night after the election is over with tired poll workers, many of them senior citizens, with multiple counts. And it's very likely in that kind of circumstance that there's going to be disparities between counting the number of pieces of paper that the machines do and 3 different people might do in the precincts. And it's very likely those disparities will be used by the loser of the election to try to claim that there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong. It's just humans, especially tired human beings, are bad at counting pieces of paper like that. Every state does make sure that the number of ballots cast equals the number of ballots counted. They just don't necessarily do it late at night on election night with tired poll workers who are exhausted. And that's why Secretary Raffensperger has said this is a very bad rule. That's why Attorney General Carr has identified that this exceeded the boundaries of the powers of the state board of elections in Georgia.
And finally, David, the former president, Donald Trump, says that non-citizens are being hurried into the country to vote. Can you just remind us, and that's also the context of some of these legal actions that are in place. Can you just remind us why that isn't happening and can't happen and won't?
Look, election officials have looked for non-citizens on the voter list. They find a very small number, and most of those are likely naturalized citizens. States like Ohio, Tennessee, Alabama, and Texas said they found a very small number of non-citizens on the rolls, and in every single one of those states, journalists within just a few days after the release of those names found naturalized citizens who were on that list. So it's likely a very small number. Then when they go to look to see if any of them voted, what they find is the number is literally 0 in most cases. Georgia looked at this in 2022, found 0 cases of non-citizen voting. The states already have the tools to prevent this. It's already illegal for non-citizens to vote. Voters need to provide ID when they register to vote. And non-citizens who are here, either legally or illegally, know that if they register to vote, they're going to be risking deportation and jail time to cast one ballot in an election in which 160 million are cast. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't happen. It happens extremely rarely. The protections are already in place to prevent it.
And as you've told us many times, the reason a lot of this kind of stuff comes up is to create an aura of confusion in which mischief makers can then more freely operate. Unfortunately, we're out of time. David, I'm just reminding everybody of that point you made earlier. David Becker, thank you as always. Hurricane Helene's path of destruction is expected to be one of the costliest storms in history. Up next, we'll discuss what that price might look like and how homeowners trying to rebuild what they're up to next. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
After Hurricane Helene left a path of destruction across the southeast over the weekend, homeowners and businesses are seeking to rebuild, and that could be costly. Moody's Analytics is predicting the storm will cause $15 to $26 billion in property damage alone, and AccuWeather estimates the total damage and economic loss could cost up to $110 billion. These figures would make Helene one of the most expensive storms in the country's history. Mark Friedlander joins us for more. He's a spokesperson for the Insurance Information Institute. Mark, thank you for being with us. So homeowners affected by the storms will be scrambling to make claims soon. Give us a sense of what that process is like. It seems like a huge challenge for the insurance companies. And then what would that do to prices for premiums and just the general overall insurance market?
While there are a lot of projections out there, John, from an insured perspective, this is not going to be a major loss event. In fact, the catastrophe modelers have indicated the loss range for private insurers will run about $5 billion to $8 billion. That's very small for a Category 4 landfalling hurricane compared to Hurricane Ian 2 years ago, which was about a $50 billion insured loss event.
So help me understand the delta or the difference between estimates of it costing $110 billion, but then that number $5 billion to $8 billion.
The full scope includes economic impacts. It doesn't include insured losses. And unfortunately, what we're seeing here is many of the losses incurred, especially in southern Appalachia, parts of Georgia, other states further away from the coast, are flood losses that are not covered by insurance. The average take-up rate for flood insurance in these areas is under 1%. So sadly, many of the victims of the storm do not have insurance coverage for this loss.
Wow. And so they're out of luck. What about federal programs for flood loss? Is there any help they can get outside of the private insurance market?
Typically with these type of disasters, John, FEMA offers an emergency grant program that individuals and families can apply for. However, that's not a replacement for insurance. You might get a small sum to help you begin the recovery, but a FEMA grant is not going to repair or rebuild your home. It is not a substitute for insurance. And unfortunately, flood insurance rather, is the largest gap we see across the country right now. Only about 6% of U.S. homeowners have a flood policy. And in many of these hard-hit areas, as I said, it's under 1% of the residents.
So if you're damaged, this seems blindingly obvious, but I'll ask it anyway. If your home is damaged by the water and you don't have flood insurance, you're out of luck. If a tree falls on it and splits it in half and you're covered, then you're covered.
Wind damage is covered by a standard home renters or condo insurance policy. Flood damage or storm surge, which is also flood, those are only covered by flood insurance.
By specific insurance for that. Okay, well, that's very helpful. Mark Friedlander with the Insurance Information Institute. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks for having me, John.
Still to come, SpaceX is coming to the rescue after Boeing fell short in space. A look at the capsule with 2 seats ready to bring home some very delayed astronauts. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now. We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
On 1-hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen.
She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Dikembe Mutombo, one of the greatest defensive players in the NBA, has died. The league says the cause of death was brain cancer. The 8-time All-Star played 18 seasons for various teams, including those in Atlanta, Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York, and Houston. He was a defensive stalwart, winning the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year 4 times in his career. Off the court, he was known for his humanitarian work, especially in his native Democratic Republic of the Congo. Dikembe Mutombo was 58 years old. A SpaceX capsule delivered 2 new crew members to the International Space Station Sunday. The Crew Dragon spacecraft also arrived with 2 empty seats. The extra room is for 2 astronauts stranded on the station since June, who are scheduled to come home next February. That's if all goes right. But not everything did with the Saturday launch. After the capsule was safely released, the reusable Falcon 9 rocket misfired and had an off-target re-entry into the Pacific Ocean. That means it didn't land where it was supposed to. SpaceX said it's suspending Falcon 9 launches while they investigate the rocket's second misfire in less than 3 months. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. A looming port strike threatens the U.S. supply chain, where negotiations stand, and how a walkout could affect consumers. Plus, Israel intensifies its military action in Lebanon, expanding into a broader regional conflict. We'll have a report from the ground in Beirut. And Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance prepare for their first and only debate of this election. What to expect when both sides take the lectern. You're streaming CBS News.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem. I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone. The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.